Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. So I've complained before on my channel how I am a little bit perturbed that a lot of the historical fiction books coming out in recent years and all the new releases often have them set in very specific eras and places. And you know what? I think we need a little bit more diversity when it comes to settings of historical novels. So this month is August of 2022, and let me just read out some of the books that are being released in the historical fiction genre for this month. Mercury Pictures presents by Anthony Mara, 1960s New York City. The Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead is set in the 1960s New York City. A Feather in the Water by Lindsay Jane Ashford, and this is set in post-World War II Germany. The Manhattan Girls by Gil Paul, which is set in the 1920s and described as a 1920s version of Sex and the City, is also set in New York City. Signal Moon, which is kind of time travel, but it's also set predominantly in the 1940s in England. The Murder in Westminster by Vanessa Riley. This is set in the Regency era. The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman, and this is set in the 1960s, 1970s. And all of these are featured in the top 50 anticipated releases coming out featured on Goodreads. These are not like obscure releases that I randomly pulled to demonstrate my point. These are the new popular historical releases, and as you can see, they're all mostly set in New York City, especially, but either America or England, and they predominantly take place in the 20th century. Only one of these doesn't take place in the 20th century. So you know what? I would really love historical fiction and historical authors to write about more time periods. For those who don't know, I got my bachelor's degree in history. I love researching history, and I love researching the history that a lot of people don't talk about. Today, I'm going to be counting down nine eras, and these are just some of the many eras that historical novelists could pick from that I would love to see more in historical fiction. So number 9 is the Persian Empire. This is an empire that existed from 550 BC to about 650 AD. So you're looking at over 1,000 years of existence. And yes, this era has been a little bit popularized by the video game series Prince of Persia and the movie, as well as by the tales of Scheherazade and 1001 Nights. However, for how massive and unique this civilization is, it amazes me that it is not as popular as its neighbors, such as Egypt and Rome. You see more historical fiction set in those time periods. And there are several reasons why I personally think it should be featured more in historical fiction. First, its domain covered pretty much all of the Middle East. So you're talking about vast and varied cultures and civilizations within one civilization. I mean, they were kind of like Rome, where they would take over a lot of territory. At the time, it was one of the main leaders of the world. It was also home to a lot of historical figures, legends, places. I just think it would be really cool to see more historical fiction set in the Persian Empire. Number 8 is one that I don't think I've ever read a book that features it, and I wish they did. And that's the Kingdom of Aksum. This existed from 100 to like 900 AD and existed in northeast Africa, just south of Egypt. And let me give you a hint at just how powerful this kingdom was. In the 3rd century, a Persian philosopher stated that Aksum was one of the world's 4 greatest kingdoms, the others being Rome, China, and Persia. And yet, in literature, it's always overlooked. Like, I do not think I've ever seen a historical fiction book that takes a look at this empire. So it's kind of around the area where Ethiopia is now today on the Red Sea. It often would trade up the Nile River with Egypt. It's also, for those who are interested in mythology, it's also considered the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant and the home of the Queen of Sheba. Think of what you could write about a trader from Aksum on search for legendary treasure. There is also evidence that this kingdom was ruled by several powerful women, making an ideal spot if you wanted to write a court drama about a queen. It was also one of the few kingdoms that developed a feudal system similar to medieval Europe and did not own slaves. Now, when it comes to Cambodian and Thai history, I see a lot of books that discuss the Khmer Rouge, which existed in the 1970s. However, there was another empire that was called the Khmer Empire, which existed far far before the Khmer Rouge. It existed in kind of the Middle Ages of Europe from like 800 to probably 1400 AD. This is debatably the most powerful empire in Southeast Asia, covering Cambodia as well as parts of other countries around it like modern Thailand, Laos, and Burma. At its peak, it was the largest pre-industrial urban center of the world. You only need to look at the massive monuments such as Angkor Wat or, forgive my pronunciation, Pramsang to see how amazing this culture was. A mostly Hindu, later Buddhist kingdom, it is just as interesting to learn about as Egyptian and Aztec cultures from different parts of the world. And yet this amazing empire seems to have been forgotten. I mean, the Khmer Empire had pretty much everything you could want in historical fiction. Gorgeous palaces, power-hungry kings, beautiful clothing. They worshiped the kings like demigods, very similar to Rome. I personally think it's definitely worth writing a story about. Number 6, the Mongol Empire. This is probably the one that most people watching this video are already familiar with. The Mongol Empire existed over a little bit over 100 years, making it the shortest era on my list. But it was also the largest contiguous land empire in history. Honestly, it is Genghis Khan. Chinggis Khan? I don't remember how you're supposed to actually pronounce it, but I'm gonna pronounce it the English butchering of the way. Genghis Khan definitely is the one you know about from that era because he's the founder of this era. Their dynasty started with only a small land in Central Asia, but eventually expanded from Central Europe to the Sea of Japan. You're looking at a massive territory. You're looking at all of China. You're looking at all the way up to the edge of what used to be the Roman Empire. Sadly, the dynasty came to an end due to internal fighting about who would be ruler. One might wonder that if the empire had continued their rampage, the entire world would have been theirs. They also have a very interesting society based on horses and riding, and even as like young children, they would be trained to ride horses. They were also nomadic, so they didn't have massive big cities like you see different civilizations on this list having. Now we're gonna go to Europe, and I think that when it comes to European history, there's a lot of history that focuses mostly on specifically English history, and I would like to see more of specifically the very early medieval dynasties. And the one specifically I'm featuring on this list is the Merovingian dynasty. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. So the Merovingian dynasty was a dynasty in the Middle Ages which dominated much of Europe, ruled by the long-haired Merovingian family. This era was called, for good reason, a kingdom of kingdoms due to the powerful kings ruling over numerous kingdoms. It plays with many medieval themes like aristocracy and was where the precursor to feudalism even started. Think the Middle Ages, but like bigger and better. However, I find medieval books almost exclusively focus on the British Isles or Viking or Norse up north. So I wish there were more books about this dynasty. Number 4, and I specifically chose one dynasty and one empire in India, but let's face it, there are so many different empires in India. I wish I saw more of those dynasties examined in historical fiction. But the one I specifically chose, and forgive my pronunciation, was the Gupta Empire, and this existed for just about 200 years from 300 to 500 AD. It's also known as the Golden Age of India for good reason. This era in India's history has been surprisingly forgotten by later eras, especially since Britain's arrival in India. I see a lot of historical books that deal with the British occupation of India, as well as Gandhi era, revolution, rebellion, and then Indian freedom, and since then. But I don't see a lot of very old history on India. But the Gupta Empire was an age of prosperity, marked by advancements in science, art, language, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy. The architecture in this era is exceptional. The Gupta era was when India was powerful, but it is also the romanticized era. This era would also be an exceptional setting for a fantasy story due to the amazing mythology and poetry written about and during this time. There is such beauty in this era, and it is the foundations of so much modern India. Unlike the previous kingdoms, Gupta was marked by overall peace and prosperity. If you are interested at all in Indian history, I highly recommend you check out about this specific era. All right, now we go to the second African kingdom. If you do see books on historical fiction in Africa, again, you see it about apartheid in South Africa. You see it on the occupation of the European powers into into Africa. You don't see it at the height of African empires, and I just want to see more of that in history. Number 3 is the Kingdom of Kongo, which existed from the 1300s all the way to kind of the late 1800s, and it's in West Central Africa. So it's on the opposite side of the African continent as the Aksum dynasty. So Kongo was an extremely powerful kingdom in West Central Africa, which is now kind of a combo of Angola, Cabinda, as well as the Republic of the Congo. So Congo was a highly centralized kingdom under a ruler, becoming major traders of ivory, metal goods, and pottery, to name a few. After their first contacts with Europeans, Congo developed a highly extensive trading network. What I find interesting about this nation is they succeeded in not being ruled by Europe for a very long time. They were not colonized until much later. Number 2, we are going to go back to America, but I feel like there's only certain specific, more modern historical eras that are examined in America. And I want to go way back to the Middle Ages of America, and we are going to explore the ancient Puebloan people, aka the Anasazi. I find the Anasazi just absolutely fascinating to learn about. They existed around 900 to about 1300 AD, and people don't even know why they ceased existing. Unlike the more popular Inca, Mayan, and Aztec societies to the south, these people seem entirely forgotten in fiction. Perhaps this is because there's less known about them than others due to their lack of a written language and their disappearance somewhere around the 14th century. The Anasazi people covered most of southern central North America, around the Four Corners region, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. When I was younger, I visited Mesa Verde, Colorado, and it was just an amazing experience. It is probably the most famous cliff dwellings of the Anasazi. I was amazed by the beauty of the architecture and the mystery surrounding the Anasazi people. As the young reader/writer I was at the time, I went home and immediately tried to find any movie, book, anything I could find about the era, and I could not find anything. It was very disappointing. Personally, I think there is so much beauty and inventive survival in this society, which makes it interesting to write about. These people did not form an organized government. They were small, separate, but intriguing. Finally, we're gonna go back to Asia, and number 1, because I love Asian history, I'm gonna go with the Korean history. Honestly, all of it. I just think that when it comes to Asian history, Korea is 90% of the time overlooked. Now, we'll say caveat, because I've noticed that there are more up-and-coming Asian authors that are being published in the historical fiction genre, and I absolutely love it. However, most of those books are set in the 1800s and beyond. So I would like more of historical books set pre-1800s in Korea. So probably early Joseon dynasty and before that. Korea by far matches Japan and China in uniqueness, complex social system, beautiful architecture, and stable government. So I wish I could see more ancient and older history about Korea. So are there any eras in history anywhere around the world that you would like to see more of in historical fiction? Clearly I need to go and write all these books that I'm hoping, because there's so many books I want to write about different eras in history, but the problem is about writing just one specific era in history, you need to do so much research just for that one era. So I see why a lot of historical authors write only about the 20th century, because it's a lot easier. There's so much documentation we have. There's so many primary sources of letters and things like that that are accessible to the public. So I understand why historical authors do it, but I don't know. I just want to see more eras, okay? I want to see more settings of historical books in different and unique eras. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!